Hi and welcome to another video on learning how to become a Lightroom ninja. Now today I want to show you 5 ways that Lightroom can turbocharge your studio photography processing. First off the bat is white balance. Now here we've got an image with obvious white balance issues. It's the camera's being set wrong, the lights are a different colour, whatever. We've ended up with quite a horrible colour cast. So how can we deal with that? Well, we do need something generally that's got some white or some grey, so we can reconfigure the white balance. So let's go into Develop module. And we're going to use the top part of the basic panel here. So I've just opened the basic panel here. So this top part is where we can change the white balance. We can do it a couple of different ways. One, we can move the temperature and the tint sliders and we can eyeball it. I'll just reset that. Or we can use the custom list, so we can pick one of these that's actually in your camera. Or we can use the eyedropper, which is my preferred tool of choice. And we click on the eyedropper, and then what we're doing is we're moving into the image and we're picking somewhere that we think should be neutral. And by neutral, I mean if you look down at the bottom of this little grid, you'll see that there's 3 values for red, the green and the blue. And to be neutral, they should be about equal, within 1 or 2 points of each other. But you can see here I've got a red of 82.1, green of 74.8 and a blue of 71.2. So there's a real red colour cast which you can actually see. So I could just click on this white jumper and it will do the job for me. But what I want to show you is just a little bit of a tip, that if you're doing the studio photography, make the first image get your model to hold up something white or something grey, which is a mid-grey. Now quite a lot of camera bags are manufactured to be a mid-grey colour, so you could use them. Open some of the camera bags and you'll find that there is a grey sheet inside it, or the inside is grey. And all you need is to be able to take a photograph of that inside your image. And then what we're going to do to colour balance off that, I'm going to click on my little eyedropper there. I'm going to move over something that is either white or is mid-grey, and I'm going to click on it. And pow! The white balance is restored. How cool is that? So, first job, get the white balance right. Click on something with the eyedropper that should be neutral, should be white or grey. Don't go for specular highlights, or don't go for this white background here, it won't work. You want something that should be a neutral white or grey, but if it's white, not a specular, not a really bright highlight. Okay, having got that sorted, let's move on to step 2. Number 2, it has a powerful editing workflow. Now this is something that you've got to really figure out for yourself. There is no right and there's no wrong answers to this. I'll just show you what I do as part of my editing workflow to give you a guide. Now you can see there's obviously some issues here that I've got some exposure and some contrast that are in from before. So I'm going to reset everything. If I hold the Alt key down, you'll see that tone changes to reset tone. I'm just going to click that, and what that's going to do is reset all these tone sliders here to 0. So you can see, as well as having a colour cast issue or a white balance issue that we've dealt with, it's also got an exposure issue. It's quite overexposed. I think I was having a really bad day. So okay, so what we'll try is we can look at the exposure slider, which you would normally gravitate to, I think. But if you watch up in the histogram at the top, if I pull the exposure slider over, you can see it's like hitting it with a big hammer. It moves the histogram really quickly to the left or to the right. So I'll reset that. Contrast, you'll see what it does is it splits. It actually, if I move it there, you'll see what's happening is it's moving the histogram apart. it's making the dark areas darker and the light areas lighter, so it gives you contrast. If we move to negative contrast, then what it's doing is it's compressing the tonal range. So what it's actually doing is it's making the whites greyer and the blacks greyer, so the whole image comes out greyer, and it does that by compressing the range. So normally we want to add a little bit of contrast just to give it a little bit of pop, so I'll just add a little bit of contrast, but for the moment I'll leave the exposure slider alone. Next I'll look at the highlights. Well, there is quite a lot of highlights, so I'll pull them down, and it's not having a great deal of effect, but it is highlighting a little bit of the edge of the model's shoulder here. If you look, when I move that, you'll see it's just bringing that back, so that's good. But I need my highlights back down at -100. I'll then look at my whites. So anything I can do, yeah, well, there's some of that in the white area, but I'll drop that down to -100 as well. And then I'm playing with the shadows and the blacks. Now the hair tends to a lot of the time be in the shadows, so if I move that, if I go too far, I'm going to block that out, but just a little bit will just darken that hair for me a little bit. Blacks, again, it's like shadows but more so I'll probably pull the blacks down a little bit and ease the shadows off a little bit. Okay, I'll just do a before and after, so I'll press the / key to give that's where we started and that's where we are now. I think that's pretty good. We're going in a good direction. Now we'll look at when you do move, let's say, the contrast slider. If you make a big contrast adjustment like we've just done, I'll just do it to 100, you can see it's actually saturated the face as well. It actually increases the saturation. Now I'll just drop that down a little bit more. And when you do large sweeping movements of the blacks and the whites, that also will have an effect on the saturation. It will saturate your image. So what we can do now is, if we have got that as a problem, we can change that with the presence sliders. And these 3 sliders are really powerful. We've got the clarity, the vibrance and the saturation. Now the clarity is contrasting the mid-tone. It's looking for the edges in the mid-tones and it's trying to enhance that contrast. Now if I pull that right over, you'll see I've got like more of a HDR, surreal sort of look. If I move it the other way with negative clarity, it really softens everything up. It blurs all the edges and softens all the edges. So generally for portrait photography you would probably err more on softening rather than hardening. But for this I'll just put 1 or 2 points of clarity in. And now my vibrance. Well, vibrance and saturation, they both attack the colour. But the saturation is called the linear response. It saturates everything. So if I whack that saturation over to +100, you'll see that the blues of the jeans are now really saturated, but the skin tones, where it was saturated, it's really knocked the heck out of it. It's really oversaturated it. Now if I reset that and then do the same with the vibrance, you'll see that the skin tones are still saturated, but they're nowhere near as bad. So it's a more subtle effect. So if you want to saturate things but protect the skin tones, then vibrance is my go-to tool. I probably use it 80% of the time now. There's an 80-20 split on when I use vibrance and saturation, because quite often I just want to saturate something but I want it subtle, and I don't find I can do that as easily with the saturation slider. It's too much. Now I don't think this is looking too bad, but I'll just try and let's say we wanted a real increase in the contrast, and you can see that that's actually affecting the skin tones. So what I would do now is I will come down to the vibrance and I'd just back that off a little bit, just to take the heat out of those skin tones if that's what I needed with contrast elsewhere. So that's just a little insight into my workflow. I'll do a before and after just to show you that's where we started and that's where we've ended up. I think we're going in a good direction with this. It's a fairly logical workflow. Some people say work top to bottom. Me, no, I'm more of higgledy-piggledy. I basically do everything to suit me. So I will move sliders, and it's a case of really just mixing and matching these sliders till you get the result that you want. Okay, that being done, let's move on. Number 3, sync and auto sync. Well, okay, here we are. We've got this series of photographs that we've worked on. This one, we've colour balanced it, and we've got the contrast and everything right that we like, and we're good to go. But all these other images, and there could be another 200, 400, if they've all been taken in very similar lighting conditions, if not the same lighting conditions. And so this same adjustment would probably be good applied to all of these. So I don't want to be individually adjusting all these images. So what I can do is I can use what's called auto sync. Now if I just click just to show you on this image here, you'll see on the thumbnail at the bottom that I've now selected that image, and that's what I'm seeing in loop view here. But if I now hold the shift key down and click on the last image, I've now selected all this row of images. But the first one here is slightly lighter, the surround of it is slightly lighter than these. And this is because this one's called the most selected, and these are the least selected. And what I can now do is I can transfer any settings from the most selected image onto all the other images that I have selected. Because if you look over here now I've selected more than one image, the sync button appears. And this is cool. So what I'm going to do, I'll click the sync button, and that brings up the synchronize settings dialog. And this is saying, well, what do you want to synchronize? What settings do you want to take from one image and add to the other? Well, today I'll do everything. I'll just say check all, and that'll put everything on. And then when I click synchronize, if you watch the thumbnails, you'll see it will synchronize those settings onto each of these images. Now they are definitely going in a better direction. There may be an odd one that you may go in and think, well, that's not quite right, and I can go and just do a little bit of a tweak on it. So here I may want to just lift the exposure on that particular image just a little bit. But it saved you an awful lot of work on all the rest that you think I don't need to do anything on. Okay, same scenario. We've got an image that we've done a lot of work on. Similar lighting conditions, so we'd like to transfer the settings onto all these other images. So I'm going to do the same again. I'm going to shift click that end image. Same again, we've got a lighter one, more selected. I'm going to go across to the sync button, but this time I'm going to click, there's a little toggle switch here, and if I click on that, I'll toggle on auto sync. And now any adjustments that I make to this image will be applied to the rest of the images. So I can go in and I'll do my white balance. That's automatically done on all the other images, and then any adjustments I make, so I'll change the exposure, and you'll see after a second it updates on every single image. So if I'll just make a daft one just to show you that it actually darkens all the images. So any adjustments I make now are automatically synchronized with every other image that I've got selected. I might say there could be hundreds of images in here. It's a real time saver, an absolute time saver. So there we are, that's sync and auto sync. Number 4 is presets. This one, they are massive time savers, and they're creative as well. You can get them free from the internet, or you can buy them, you can purchase them, and all you do, download them and install them. Now the presets live in the presets little folder here, and you can see I've got one or two. Yes, I do use presets a lot. And these, let me just have a look at, let's say, the black and white, the Lightroom ones. And here we can see there's some presets inside this Lightroom black and white presets folder. And if you hover over them, so I'm not clicking, I'm just hovering, if you look up in the navigator panel, you'll see a preview of what that preset would do if you clicked. So I'll go and have a look at that one. That's a low contrast, that's a black and white look, and that's a black and white look too. Okay, well, let's click on that one. And what that will do is then apply that preset to the image. But what is the preset? Well, the preset is actually the position of all these sliders. So you can see on this one now, this preset, it's taken the image to black and white, and then it's moved the highlights, the shadows, the whites and the black slider to these particular positions. Just watch these sliders and I'll click on another preset. And you see how the positions of all the sliders change as we move through and click on different presets. So it's basically just a record of where all these sliders are. And what you can do is you can accept one of these. So let's go and say, well, I quite like that one, but it's not exactly what I want. Right, okay, so what you can then do is go in and make some changes. I'll say, well, I'll make the shadows a little bit lighter so I can see the hair. I like that. Probably a little bit on the exposure, and the highlights, and we'll have it a little bit softer. We'll have some negative clarity. Okay, so now you've got a new set of unique instructions. Now you can save them out as your own preset. So I'm going to go up and click the plus, and we'll call this Ken's Black and White. I'm going to save it in the user presets folder. I'm going to save everything. So basically what I'm saying is I want every slider, I want to save that position of it, and I'll click create. And if we look in user presets now, I've now got one called Ken's Black and White. So I can reset everything on this and say, right, we're back to the original image. I'll just color balance it. And then I can say, right, okay, well, do I want to try, I'll try Ken's Black and White preset. Click, and it automatically puts all the sliders back to where they were. And now I can use that preset on anyone. I can go to this other image and think, oh, I wonder what that looks like in black and white with Ken's Black and White preset, and I can click on it. Quite like that actually. So you can build up some quite unique and complex presets by using anything that's in the basic panel, and save it out to use on any of your future images. Now, how cool is that? Well, that's all for now about presets. If you want to know more about this powerhouse feature, then look in my beginners course on the channel, where I've got some videos going into much more detail on making and using these presets. That being done, let's move on. Number 5, local adjustments. Now these are lifesavers. Everything we've done up to press has been globally. All we've done in the basic panel, it's affected the whole image. So now we'd like to just affect small parts of the image. And let's just take, for example, this shot here. Well, we've got a couple of issues, and one of them is, let's say, her teeth. So let's zoom in a little bit on her mouth just to have a look at that, and say, her teeth could be a little bit whiter. She could do with a little bit of dental work. Okay, so what we're going to use is a tool, and these tools sit here above the basic panel, and the tool for this is called the adjustment brush. So I'm going to click on that. You can see we've got a lot of sliders in here, but where it says effect, there are some standard brushes, and what you can do, you can tailor these brushes and you can make your own brushes. But we'll start off with, say, an exposure. So here we'd like the teeth to be a little bit lighter, so this is my starting off brush, and I'm just going to pull a little bit of exposure into there. Now nothing's happening on here because we haven't painted an area yet, we haven't defined as area. At the moment I'm just trying to define my brush. And I'd also like it to take a little bit of the yellow out, so I'm going to pull the saturation down. And then square brackets, I can make my brush smaller, and I'll just paint over the teeth. You can see there we've got a few grand's worth of dental work there for free. Okay, it's maybe a little bit too much, but now I've defined the area, and if you move on, you can see this little pin. That's defining that I've done an adjustment. And if I hover over it, you'll see that it goes pink, and it looks pretty gruesome. But that's the area that I've painted over. That's the mask. And what I can do now is it's a live adjustment, so I can change any of these sliders. So if I wanted the teeth to be brighter, which I don't, you could move positive, but I'm just going to take a little bit out of there. And then maybe the highlights, just lift the highlights a little bit, and maybe a little bit of clarity. Oh, and a bit of sharpness. But also, see, if I pull that over, you'll see they'll go yellow again. So I just want a bit of negative saturation just to make the teeth white. And let's just have a quick look at before and after. Down to the bottom of the panel there's this little toggle switch, and if you click on that, it goes before, click, and after. That turns on and turns off the adjustment, and I think that's pretty cool. Okay, one more. Let's say that we want to soften the skin a little bit. Okay, so we'll do a new adjustment. Let's have a look if there's anything in the custom that helps us. Oh, there's a clarity brush. Okay, well, I'll start off with a clarity brush, and what that's doing is that's zeroed everything but left me minus 49 on the clarity. Now negative clarity means it makes things softer. So let's just go for broke. I'll pull that right over to minus 100, square brackets to get a nice big brush, and I'll start painting on. Now you can't see much happening on here, but what I'll do is if I go down to the toolbar, there's this little box called Show Selected Mask Overlay. If I click on that, it puts a red ruby lith overlay wherever you're painting the adjustment. So I'm not painting with red, I'm painting with softness at the moment, or with negative clarity. But it just gives you an idea of where you're painting, so you can avoid things like the eyes and the teeth. But when I've got that more or less where I want it to be, I can go and switch that off, and now you can see I've got a nice soft face. And because it's a live preview, I can take it off. I can make it go negative. Oh dear, that's not nice. Or I can put 10%, 20%, 30%, up to 100% softness in. And again, I'll go down the bottom and I'll switch it off. So that's before and that's after. A lot more even and softer skin tone. So that's it. 5 tips to turbocharge your studio photography workflow using Lightroom. If you want to know more about all or any of these tools or techniques, then please check out my Lightroom Beginners course, where there are more detailed videos to help you get more out of Lightroom. I certainly hope you've enjoyed this video. If you find it useful, please subscribe to my channel if you're not already done so. And if you have any specific requests, then leave me a comment below the video, and I will try to answer as many as I can. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.